Okay, so let's talk about online degrees. They are absolutely booming, right? They've completely shifted from this, niche alternative to a totally mainstream path to a degree. But with that explosion in popularity comes a really big question. How do we make sure they aren't just convenient, but that they're actually credible? Today, we're going to dive into how we can actually architect trust in online education.
So let's get one thing straight right away. The digital campus, it is not a backup plan anymore. Not even close. For literally hundreds of thousands of students, online learning is the main event. It's become absolutely essential for higher education to even work, let alone grow.
And if you want to understand the scale we're talking about, just look at this number. In Australia, we're talking over 330,000 students studying completely online. That's about 1/5 of all university students. Think about that. 1 in 5. So yeah, this is not some tiny niche. It's a huge, critical part of how we learn now.
And here's the thing. For so many of these people, online learning isn't just a nice to have. It's not about convenience. It is literally their only way to get a degree. Without it, that door to a university education is just slammed shut. So who are we talking about here? Who really depends on this?
Well, it's a really diverse group of people. We're talking about students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, people living in regional and remote areas, people with disabilities or who are caring for family members. We're talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and mature age learners who are trying to balance work and part-time study. For every single one of these groups, having high-quality, trustworthy online programs isn't just a choice, it's absolutely essential.
Okay, but when something gets this big and this important, it naturally comes under a microscope, right? And that scrutiny is even more intense now with the explosion of generative AI. Which brings us to the heart of the matter, the real problem. How do we know that real learning is actually happening on the other side of that screen? It really all boils down to two killer questions, and everyone is asking them: universities, employers, even the students themselves. Question 1, is the work I'm looking at really the student's own? And question 2, which is maybe even more important, does this work actually prove that they've mastered the material, that they have the skills the degree says they have?
Now, to even begin to answer those questions, you have to understand a really crucial difference between two ideas: assessment security and assurance of learning. Think of it like this. Assessment security is tactical. It's like checking the lock on a door for one specific exam. You're just confirming who's there. But assurance of learning, that's strategic. That's the entire architectural blueprint for the house. It's the guarantee that the whole structure is sound.
Let's dig into that a little more. Security is like a single snapshot in time, a photo of one moment. Assurance, on the other hand, is the whole movie. It's about systematically collecting evidence over the entire course of a degree. So you can see, security is important, for sure, but it's really just one small piece of a much, much bigger puzzle when it comes to building genuine trust.
Of course, we can't talk about online learning without talking about the pandemic. It was, for all intents and purposes, a massive global stress test for the whole system, right? Educators everywhere were basically thrown into the deep end, and what they learned through that trial by fire, well, it was completely transformative.
And this quote, it just brings the struggle down to a human level. You know, trying to get real collaboration going in online breakout rooms, that was a massive headache for so many instructors. It's that feeling of, are they actually talking and working together or just sitting there with their cameras off? It's the perfect example of how just having the technology is never enough.
And this next one really shows you the sheer amount of work that was involved. This wasn't just a matter of, uploading a lecture video. Faculty had to completely replan their entire courses from scratch. We're talking new lesson plans, new ways to evaluate students. Everything had to be rethought. But you know what they say about pressure and diamonds, right? All of that challenge, it actually led to some incredible innovation. Educators got creative. They came up with new solutions and new ways of teaching that have honestly changed online learning for the better, for good.
So, one of the biggest changes was moving away from that old, top-down, sage-on-the-stage lecture model. Instead, we saw the rise of things like the fully online learning community model. And what that really means is rethinking the digital classroom, not as a place where an instructor just talks at you, but as a space that students and instructors build together. It's way more collaborative and way more engaging.
Another big shift was embracing principles like Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. The core idea is simple. Give students multiple ways to learn and multiple ways to show what they've learned. So you started seeing more flipped classrooms, a wider variety of assessments instead of just one big final exam, more flexible deadlines, all of it designed to support the fact that not everyone learns in the same way.
Okay, so taking all these lessons, experts have come up with some really smart, sophisticated models for providing that assurance of learning we were just talking about. Let's walk through 3 powerful ways you can architect an online program that people can really, truly trust.
All right, model number 1 is probably the one you're most familiar with: supervised assessments at specific locations. Basically, for the really important tests, the student has to physically go somewhere, a campus, a testing center, where someone can verify their ID and watch them. The upside is pretty obvious. You have very high confidence about who is taking the test. The downside? Well, it can be a huge barrier for those regional students we talked about.
Model 2 is all about the real world, accredited workplace supervision. This is perfect for professional degrees. Think nursing, teaching, engineering. The assessment happens right there in the workplace, with students applying what they've learned under the eye of a qualified supervisor. It's fantastic for authentic, hands-on learning. The big catch, though, is if you can find enough high-quality placements for every single student.
And Model 3 is really different. It's called a longitudinal synchronous partnership, which is a fancy way of saying it's all about building a relationship over time. Instead of one-off exams, you have a single educator who works closely with the student for a long period, with lots of regular, real-time interaction. This gives the educator a much deeper understanding of the student's progress. It's an amazing model, but as you can probably guess, it's extremely resource-intensive.
So there you have it. We have the blueprints. We know how to build trustworthy online programs. But going from that blueprint to an actual standing building means we have to deal with some pretty major systemic hurdles. And these aren't just about designing a good course, they're about the fundamental structure of higher education itself.
First up is what you could call the quality scale paradox. On one hand, universities are being pushed to expand, to enroll more and more students. But on the other hand, they're also being told to improve quality. Here's the problem. Really good online education isn't cheap. It's not a shortcut. And if you try to scale it up without investing the money, you risk creating a system that actually hurts the very students you're trying to help.
The next huge hurdle is workforce instability. Check out this number. An estimated 60% of academic staff in Australia are on casual or fixed-term contracts. 60%! Now, how are you supposed to build those long-term, relationship-based assurance models we just talked about when the staff themselves don't have job security? It's almost impossible. And the third major challenge? Let's call it a governance gap. What this means is that, way too often, the big decisions about which online learning tools to buy or how to structure programs are made by administrators, and the people who actually have to teach with those tools, the pedagogical experts, aren't even in the room. If these models for building trust are going to succeed, the educators have to be in the driver's seat. So here's the bottom line. Online education holds the key to university access for millions of people. That's not up for debate. And we have the blueprints, we have the knowledge to make these programs truly worthy of our trust. So the final question isn't about how, it's about if. Are we, as a society, actually ready to build and invest in the systems required to make sure all that incredible potential becomes a reality?